Shame and scandal in the family. Whoa.
Hello from Castle Goring, from Nikki and from me. I have to say, I did somebody a grave injustice and I need to right the wrong. So we're going to start with that. I received a message on behalf of Lindsay Spence to say that she did indeed get in touch with both Brian Sweeney and myself, and that both of us declined to cooperate with her book. When I got that message, I had it investigated. Now, of course, Brian is not here, so I can't speak for Brian, but I will say at the time that she approached me, Brian was having terrible, terrible, terrible problems. And I'm not going to go into them beyond saying that he was barely able to function because of all that was happening to him. So it is entirely possible that she got in touch with him and he didn't remember. I certainly remember us speaking about the fact that she didn't get in touch with us. It turns out that she definitely got in touch with me. Her original message, which was sent to my agent on the 8th of October 2017 at 17:18, said, "Dear Mike, I am wondering if you could pass my email on to Lady Colin Campbell. I have been commissioned to write a biography on Margaret, Duchess of Argyll, to be published in February 2019, and I would love to speak to Lady C if she is willing. Many thanks, Lindsay Spence." Mike sent that email on to me at 16:20, I think, because it says 8 September 2017, 16:20. And he said, "For you." Now, I have to tell you, I think that there's something wrong with her email timings, which possibly could explain where other problems arose. But anyway, he sent it on to me, and I've only had this investigated yesterday, and I've noticed the disparities in the time, because Mike received his email at 17:18, or it was sent at 17:18, but mine was at 16:20. Well, 16 comes before 17. Anyway, I wrote to him at 19:35, 7:35, saying, "Many thanks, Mike. How are you doing? XX." I then wrote to her at 19:41 on the 8th of September. Subject: Margaret, Duchess of Argyll. "Dear Miss Spence, Mike Hollingsworth has passed your email to me. May I ask which publishing house has commissioned you and what your take, in quotation marks, on Margaret is going to be? Question mark. In principle, I am not averse to speaking to you, but I feel I need rather more information than you have provided to date. Yours sincerely, Georgia Campbell." Until yesterday, I had no knowledge of having received a reply. So when they say in the message that Brian and I declined, I don't know if Brian declined, but I definitely didn't decline, because I never ever said no. She evidently responded to me on Friday the 8th of September at 1956, saying, "Hello, thank you for your prompt reply. My take on Margaret will be a sympathetic one, as I can only write about subjects I care about. I find her to be a fascinating woman who was badly treated by the establishment. I admire her resilience and how she carried on, even though the Duke of Argyll did everything in his power to destroy her. That is more or less how I pitched it to my publisher, the History Press. I think the moral of the story is that Margaret was a woman who was ahead of her time, and I think the latter will appeal to a lot of people, especially young women. I signed the contract last week, but I have been researching her for a few years now. I will be writing to her children in due course to let them know of my intentions. Please let me know if you have any more questions. Lindsay." Well, I never received that email. In fairness to her, I should say, at the time I was very ill and had been ill for the better part of a year, because I nearly died in October 2016. So this is September 2017, and I was still not properly recovered. And also, one of the things that was affected when I was ill was my memory. But I never received that email. I have no recollection of having received that email. I could have received it and forgotten about it, but the way the investigation has gone means that I never received it. Now, I'm not technological, so I don't know why I didn't receive it, but it certainly was sent to me and it was received. Now, it also has to be said that I had people monitoring my stuff at the time because I was so ill. And of course, it was nobody's business how ill I was, and I wasn't making a song and dance about being ill, because quite frankly, the last thing one wants is sympathy. And also, throughout the period that I was really ill, whenever I had a duty, I got out of my bed and executed it. So, no matter how ill I was, if I could do something, I did it. But it doesn't alter the fact I was barely functional for over a year. And when I functioned, it was really almost on autopilot. So I'm not saying that I didn't see it and that I wasn't somehow responsible for not remembering it. That is a possibility, but I don't think that's what happened. I think what happened is that the email was either went to spam or it was received and it was looked at. And for all I know, I could have been told about it and I didn't register it because I was that ill. But also everybody knew how ill close to me, knew how ill I was, and that they had to keep on top of things with me because I couldn't keep on top of them. So I just say all of that for what it's worth, because I do not wish to do Lindsay Spence an injustice, and she definitely tried to get in touch with me. It's a pity that this happened, because I did read her book, and I have said before that I thought it was a good book. And I think it's actually the best book that exists on Margaret. So somebody has asked me which book I would recommend, and I would recommend The Grit in the Pearl by Lindsay Spence. I think it's a pity because she obviously tried to get to the truth via Brian and me, and I don't know what happened with Brian. I suspect she most likely did try to get in touch with him, and he might well have declined, but I don't think he did, because he told me that she hadn't been in touch with him. But he could have forgotten as well, because he was really in, quite frankly, a terribly difficult time, health-wise and otherwise at the time. He was really struggling for his survival, literally. So I just say all of that in the interests of fairness. I think it's a pity, but obviously it was meant to be. Because, and why it's a pity? Because I think that with my input and Brian's input, she would have actually been able to understand. We could have steered her to where the truth truly lay. And because she had all of the facts, she simply didn't appreciate the significance of everything she had. And she came to erroneous conclusions occasionally. But I will give her full credit. She tried to be fair. I will also say that Margaret was definitely not a woman ahead of her time. Margaret was very much a woman typical of her time. But that's for some other time. So anyway, she definitely did get in touch with me, and apologies for having said that she didn't. Now, who definitely didn't get in touch with either me or Bran was Sarah Phelps, possibly because she thought that we had declined to be involved with Lindsay Spence. Brian, by the time Sarah Phelps was involved, I don't think would have been up to having any input into it, but I certainly would have. So these things happen in life. Life is not a perfect proposition. What can I say? It's a great pity that it happened, because I think she was motivated to get to the truth. And it's just sad that it never happened where our input was concerned. So Paul Wilcox says, I hope the show is sympathetic towards Margaret. Probably not. She was a lady in every sense of the word. Did you see the video of her wedding and that dress? I'm very familiar with both the video and of her wedding dress. Yes. And she was, whatever else she was, Margaret was a lady to her fingertips. You know, okay, they want to make the story topical by saying she was a woman ahead of her time. If that pleases them, run with that ball. But in fact, I've got news for you. For all of the rhetoric, today's mores are far less tolerant and far more puritanical than when Margaret was young or when I was young. So I make that point for what it's worth. Heidi says, Lady C, or anyone else who might know, what book would you recommend on the life of Margaret, Duchess of Argyll? The Grit in the Pearl by Lindsay Spence. Whatever you do, don't waste your time reading Charles Castle's rubbish, The Duchess Who Dared. Utter rubbish. Bernadette N. says, you could also read, actually, no, I stopped to think of it, Forget Not, Margaret's autobiography. Bernadette N. Hello there, wonderful Lady C. I placed a comment on another channel at the time of the wedding. Obviously, I think she's referring to Harry and Meghan's wedding. It was reported that palace officials were preparing to fly to California to help Thomas, I'm now being asked where to find this info. Can you confirm, please, that this infamous couple stopped this, or am I dreaming? Thank you for such wonderful videos. Bernadette N., you're not dreaming. My information was that the palace was desperate to have involvement with Thomas Markle and to help Thomas Markle out, and recommended it more than strongly to both Meghan and Harry, and she kiboshed the idea. Well, the conclusion I came to when I was told it was that she didn't want, and in fact I think I actually said this in my book Meghan and Harry, the real story, she didn't want garrulous daddy spilling the beans on her, because garrulous daddy was going to, let me put it this way, elucidate upon points that Meghan would have preferred or had been shoved on the rocks. She did everything in her power to block her father from way before the wedding. I don't see how anybody can come to any conclusion if they're a reasonable person with a brain in their head and powers of discernment, but that she quite deliberately didn't want her father anywhere near her, Harry, or anybody at the palace, because she didn't want his mouth to blow her cover. The deal had to be done first. And once the deal was done, she excluded him, in my opinion, because, again, he would have shone a light on the dark corners that she wished to keep in the shadows. Helen Robinson says, "Hello, Lady C. Thank you for another wonderful video. So interesting and thought-provoking. Thank you very much. Have you seen any of Mark Maguire's videos on this channel? They got away with murder. His last video was about the murder of King George V in 1936 by his doctor, Lord Dawson of Penn. It was so interesting, and I would love to hear your views on this topic. Much love from South Africa." Lord Dawson of Penn has the distinction of having killed not only a king, but a queen. In 1936, and this is in my book, I think it was I first did it in Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. But I don't remember, anyway, I did it years ago. I was one of the first people who ran with that ball. He euthanized King George V so that he would die in time for the Times to break the death announcement to the nation. He thought it was unseemly that the king would die, if he was going to die at all. We need to remember, in 1928, I think it was, he had suffered a similar crisis and recovered against all expectations. So there was always a slim chance that he could have recovered from that bout. But not when Lord Dawson of Penn shot him up with drugs to kill him. Fast forward a year or two, must have been 2 or 3, Queen Maud of Norway comes to London for a gynecological operation. Lord Dawson, and incidentally, she was fully functional and in relatively good health, in quotes. Lord Dawson opened her up and discovered that she had cancer and took it upon himself to kill her rather than do what he could and give the woman the months or years or even weeks that she had left, because in the natural course of events, had he not taken the decision to put her down, she would have recovered, in quotes, enough to die the death that God intended her to die. God didn't have any say in it. Lord Dawson of Penn had all the say. Chilling, isn't it, when those who know better take it upon themselves to tell those of us who don't know as much as they do, not only what we should think and how we should behave and what we should say and do, but even whether we should live or not, because that is the natural consequence of people who decide that they know so much better than everyone else, that they are going to call the shots, and we just have to accept their diktats and their decisions. Snobby Sydney Sider says, the Jussie Smollett conviction for making hoax hate crime allegations is extremely damaging for the Montecito duo brand. Lays bare how a non-entity aspiring B-C list celeb can fabricate a phony, racist victim narrative purely for their own opportunistic career development and PR ends. I see the parallels that you're making. They do exist. They do exist. But we need to remember that Jussie Smollett broke the law. Meghan and Harry, for all their mischievous embroidery, actually do so within the legal framework. There is a big difference between somebody who maneuvers, manipulates, uses hate crimes, uses hate, uses racism, uses all sorts of things the way Jussie Smollett did, and somebody who uses very similar tools within the legal framework the way Meghan has done and Harry to a lesser extent. That's why Meghan is clever and Jussie Smollett was not. Annette B.L. says, in this Sunday's Times, there is extensive coverage of the police investigating Prince Charles for a breach of the 1925 Honours Prevention and Abuse Act. That newspaper broke the story about Michael Fawcett and the Saudi billionaire, and seems to be stoking the fires for all they're worth to scorch the royal family. Do you think the Sunday Times is deliberately trying to damage the Prince of Wales? Without a doubt. Rupert Murdoch is an anti-monarchist. He is a Republican in small r. In other words, he wants a republic. Not that he wants the Republican Party in America to be elected in England. So for those Americans who think Republican is an exclusively party political American term, I hasten to point out it's not. So, to continue. Do you think the Sunday Times is deliberately trying to damage the Prince of Wales? And can you tell us whether any offence has been committed? Or whether this is just the Sunday Times fomenting trouble to create news rather than reporting upon it? Good point. They're not reporting upon the news. They are fabricating it, while also making a lot of money for its owners. Absolutely. Big scandal, bigger the scandal, more money flows into Murdoch's coffers. Pushing their anti-monarchist agenda at the same time, absolutely. And possibly also trying to live up to their banner of being the Sunday newspaper of the year. Yes, they are the Sunday newspaper of the year. I take the Sunday Times. It can be good. It's also extremely lavatorial in certain regards, especially where trying to foment royal scandals will be concerned. Last year, this time, if I'm not mistaken, they were busy trying to make out that Prince Michael had been doing something untoward. They had to drop that. They seem remarkably persistent with trying to create this nonsense that somehow Prince Charles or his people have breached the Honours Prevention and Abuses Act of 1925. Let me tell you, the Act was created in 1925 because in 1922 there was a huge scandal involving David Lloyd George, who had been Prime Minister of England and had been selling honours. He had an agent, and the agent was selling honours on his behalf for the money to go to the Liberal Party, £10,000 for a knighthood, £30,000 for a baronetcy, and upwards of £50,000 for a peerage. So I suppose if you were a baron, it was 50, but if you were a viscount, it might have been 60 or 70. Gosh, one knows it can't have been anything for a duke, because the monarch wouldn't have been, no matter how much money was involved, passing a duke. The last non-royal duke to be made a duke was the Earl of Fife, who was made the Duke of Fife, and that was because he married the Princess Royal. Okay, so here we are. Only one person has ever been convicted under the Act since 1925. That's 96 years. Do the math. Nearly 97. Maundy Gregory, Lloyd George's honours broker, who was done in 1933 for selling honours on behalf of the Vatican. They weren't even British honours, they were the Vatican honours. There is no way Michael Fawcett, who has been made to resign over this, there's no way Michael Fawcett sold one honour to anybody for money. We need to understand what selling an honour means. It means you have a price for the honour and you sell it to somebody who pays you money for that honour. We have in previous videos covered the fact that Australia, for instance, gives the Order of Australia to people who make donations or who give services to the Australian state in terms of charity. In Britain, we give honours. That's what the orders of the British Empire were created for, to honour people who have somehow made a contribution, whether it be financial, personal, in terms of labour or otherwise, to the national good. Sheikh Mahfouz Mubarak Mahfouz was given the paltry honour of a CBE, not even a knighthood, a CBE. It's one of the lowest ranks in the orders of the British Empire, for giving something like £2.5 million. He didn't buy the CBE for £2.5 million. He gave the money and was given an honour. It happens all the time. In 2006, I think it was, Tony Blair, just let me check the date. I think it was in 2006. Yes, following complaints by the Scottish National Party MP, Angus MacNeil, the Metropolitan Police were called in to investigate possible breaches of the Act because the Labour Party and Tony Blair had proposed 4 rich businessmen for honours who nothing came of it. If somebody makes a donation to a charity, and we're not speaking about a political party here, because the last massive investigation was in 2006 and it was over donations to the Labour Party. This is donations to charity. And Rupert Murdoch and his Sunday Times team are trying to make out that the Prince of Wales and his people have been selling honours. I personally think the Prince of Wales should sue the Sunday Times. That's what I think he should do. And I think while they're about it, Michael Fawcett should consider suing the Sunday Times as well. Because not only will his reputation have been severely injured, but the mere fact that he's had to resign his position says that he has suffered actual damage. I think they really ought to understand that malevolence should be met with decisiveness. I think the whole thing absolutely stinks to high heaven. Claudia Buzek says, Dear Lady C, through history, the struggle for power within the royal household has been ongoing, brothers and cousins coveting the power of those in power. often running to France or other foreign lands to raise up armies to return and overthrow the king. I presume, my dear Claudia Buzek, you're speaking of in Plantagenet times. And you're referring to the War of the Roses, etc. I don't think it's happened recently. Well, not that recently. The last struggle within the family for power was Bonnie Prince Charlie, and that was in 1745. But anyway, even though we are in modern times, it seems as if the jealous spare is trying to repeat history. Interesting point. Tactics may have taken on a different format, but I think given Meghan's comment about being only one plane crash away from the throne and how hard they are working to discredit the monarchy at every turn, Harry's found a partner to help him with his goals. I believe Harry is much more involved in all of this destructiveness and uses Meghan as a smokescreen. What do you think? I think their conduct certainly suggests the conclusions that you have come to. Whether you have come to a conclusion erroneously or not, their conduct does suggest a degree of viciousness, destructiveness, and maliciousness, which begs the question, aside from making themselves a lot of money and getting themselves a lot of column inches, do they have a more malevolent motive in terms of, if not doing a Philippe Egalite and trying to have the throne for themselves, somehow poisoning the pond for Charles and William? Well, let me put it this way. They seem to be dripping poison in everybody's ear about their family. And they are, by common consent, undermining the security of the nation and the monarchy. More than that, I think I shouldn't say. Listen to what I've said, and you will see exactly what I think. I need to be careful what I say for legal reasons, but I can tell you, hell will freeze over before King Henry IX and Queen Meghan the first and last ever will sit on a British throne. I, for one, would form a Republican Party if nobody else did. Not American Republican, British Republican, the British Republican Party. Mary S. says, headline in Daily Mail, is Meghan bullying probe being kicked into long grass? Are they going to let down their former bullied employees, Lady C? I need to be careful what I say, because it's not always desirable to say too much on sensitive subjects. Because aside from anything else, you should not give away the nuances in an intricate situation. But what I will say is, my understanding is that there is no eagerness at the palace to rush the inquiry. Not that they intend to subvert the inquiry, but they're not going to be rushing it. The sword of Damocles, when it swings from the ceiling, is hopefully a warning that if it is released, it might chop off your head. Release it, and your head doesn't get chopped off. There goes the threat. Much better to keep the inquiry on a low boil. Meghan and Harry know how to threaten. They're not the only ones. They know how to play their cards so that everybody else loses. They're not unique. C.B. Holmes says, Lady C, I am currently reading your book, The Real Diana, which is very well researched and written. Thank you very much. As you look back on Diana's life, did she suffer from ennui? Do you think Harry is also experiencing ennui? Eckhart Tolle says, without struggle and challenges, we would just sleep our way through life. Challenges wake us up. Well, there is no doubt that Diana struggled for meaning and that Diana at times suffered from depression. Harry, I would prefer to give a wide berth at this point. There is never any excuse, even if you're depressed, for treachery. You can be depressed and decent. You can't be decent and treacherous. Yes, to go back to the question, Diana did search for meaning, and her search usually involved people thinking well of her, and a part of her search was love with a man and through a man. She was romantic, nothing wrong with that. I think she was sometimes immaturely romantic. There were times when I thought that she thought that life was a Barbara Cartland novel, because her step-grandmother used to send her all of the books that she published, and Barbara published well over 500. And Diana grew up on a diet of Barbara Cartland novels, all of which were pap of the highest order. But I don't think there's anything unique about women of childbearing age wanting to have a partner who loves them and who they love, and even after childbearing age. But I will say from my own personal experience, when you're young and the hormones are raging, you definitely have to answer the biological imperative. When you're older, it's not so necessary, or sometimes even desirable. So I just make the point that Diana was not unique. Where she was somewhat, shall we say, unusual, was that if she wanted a man, she went after him like gangbusters, and she didn't care whether he was married or not. or whether he was involved with someone else or not. And when I just use Oliver Hoare as one example and Will Carling as another. Don't take my word for it. Ask Julia Carling. Diana broke up their marriage. They'd only been very recently married. Well, she did it in other ways as well. Charity work. She was very emotional and needed to be engaged emotionally. But equally, when she wasn't getting the attention and the nurturing that she both desired and needed, she would be very sad sack. I mean, the Palombos used to speak about how she was on a trip to Paris where she was just with them mooching around and just obviously depressed. And when some members of the public came up to her, she came alive, and thereafter she was okay. So she needed public recognition and acknowledgement, and it wasn't enough to have it from friends. It needed to be from men and the public. That's, I suppose, an antidote to ennui. Harry, I don't even want to go there. I'm not prepared to let him off the hook, nor am I prepared to pin him up on the hook unfairly. So I think it's better not addressed. Queen's Martini says, Lady Colin Campbell, question, would you be willing to read Sideshow Hapless's memoirs to us on your show after Meghan Markle finishes writing them? Oh gosh, I just love it. Mickey, come and give Marty a kiss. This is too funny for words. Come on. Come on. You need to laugh at this as well. I do so enjoy listening to you. And Mickey says so does she, but she'd prefer to have me accompanying her snores. As does everyone else, I am sure. Not sure about that, but thank you very much. As I boycott anything the Markles do, I will not be willing to buy Sideshow Hapless's book. Thank you for all you do, and hugs to Mickey. Mickey hugs. Mickey's right here by me, but I don't know that you can see her. I suppose when it comes out, if I'm still doing this, I will be duty-bound to review it. And maybe even if I'm not still doing this, I will review it. Yeah. I'm sure we will have several laughs over it. Donna Simmons says, according to the California birth records, Rachel Meghan Markle was born on the 4th of August 1981 in Los Angeles. Anyone can look it up. She's just one of many people, and I have actually previously spoken to the family about this, and they have told me that she was born in 1981. What I find interesting in all of this is that Meghan would supply information through Jason Knopf that ends up in a British court, where her elastic attitude to fact is proven yet again by the fact that she is inaccurate about the age difference between her siblings and herself. I think I said in my previous video that it doesn't really matter whether Meghan was 40 or 44. The mere fact that she creates such havoc even over her birth tells you that Meghan Markle is truly an extraordinary human being. My personal opinion is that somebody who is so factually unreliable not only needs our sympathy, but help. Whether the help, and I'm not speaking about our help, I'm speaking about medical help, whether that medical help would actually be able to solve the problem or even alleviate it somewhat is a moot question. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening to this. I hope it has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and keep the questions and comments coming in. This is impossible without your input. God bless. Bye-bye.